What's going on, everybody? Welcome back, Face Off Sports Network. I'm Anthony Servino. Follow me on X at The Real NFL Guru. Follow the show at the FF Face Off and at fffaceoff.com. We can be found on all of the top social media and podcast platforms. Back with me on a Football Monday Week 8 reaction show, Pete Nova at Supernova 38. Pete, what's going on?
What's going on? Just sharing the links for the show and getting ready for Monday Night Football to see my boy Russell Wilson and the New York Giants. And yeah, it should be a fun night. Do you have? I don't. Sometimes I feel like you don't even look. Do you have any chance to win any leagues tonight with certain players going or?
I did peek because when I do my waiver wire percentages, I have to go on Sleeper and I get like own percentages in the morning, and it looks like I did really well.
Nice.
So obviously, I didn't look at the FFPC yet, which is what I care about the most, and I have a lot of teams in there. But I have some of the same players, so I'm just assuming like I have a lot of Mooney in the FFPC, Garrett Wilson who went over 100. So I feel like I'm in a good spot in these leagues.
Yeah. By the way, so George Pickens, I told you, was plus 150 to score a touchdown, but somebody just let me know that he is actually better odds on FanDuel. He's plus 190. It's a big difference.
Yeah. There's so much here's a crazy one. I think it was Mason. Now, obviously, Mason didn't play. He got hurt last night. He was like minus 200 on DraftKings. He was like minus 180 on FanDuel, and I think on Bet360. No, he was minus 190 on Bet365. He was minus 135 on FanDuel, and I used a 30% boost and got him to minus 105. Obviously, it's all moot. But if you don't have, if anybody's betting out there, you have to have 3 to 4 minimum sportsbook accounts with funds in it and shop the lines. For that reason alone that Pete's saying, that I'm saying, like all these sports books, they do have different odds. They do have, like you might see a player whose rushing yards line is 49.5 at minus 110. Another book might have it at 48.5. And if you like the over, like you're getting 2 yards for free for the same juice a lot of the times.
Yeah. Yeah,
the Dak interception that I tweeted out. It was like minus 115 on FanDuel, minus 160 on 365, minus 140 in DraftKings. With no boost, FanDuel had by far the best odds.
Yeah, it's like that sometimes. It's always good. I mean, look, I get it. Sometimes people don't have the funds to spread their money across books and stuff.
Even if you got 20, if you have a main book, throw like 20, 20, and 20 and a few other ones just in case there is that one variance bet or variance line.
Yeah.
You don't need to have hundreds of thousands in every book. Just have 10 or 20 bucks outside of your main one spread around.
Well, and the nice thing too about FanDuel is they also have that 25% live boost too. So if you get Pickens at plus 190, once the game starts, if you want, you could just live bet it to boost it up, or you could wait like a possession or two and then bet it after, and get it at like probably closer to 300. Cool. Well, a lot of people in here. Let's check the chat out first before we jump into the show. Jamie's here. Albert is here as well. Zach, I don't know why I called Zach Jamie. Zach said best show of the week right here. Yes, sir. Williamson said send Anthony Richardson back to the bench where he belongs. Jared Fortin's in here. Greg is in here. Hustle Kings. We got a lot of people in here, so we appreciate it. There's a couple questions. Why don't we try to answer a few questions and then we'll get to our first topic.
I'm just going to throw my fan on real quick.
Yeah. Anthony will throw his fan on. I'll get to the first few questions here. Jared Fortin, what's up? He said, "What's up, guys? Need the experts in one league. Need the experts in one league in." Okay, I'm just gonna start off on the other half of this. RBs are a mess. I have Mixon, Mason, Madison, ETN, and Pierce. Would you deal Chuba, Javonte, or Chubb? Also have an offer on DJ Moore to get CMC. Yeah, I mean, if you can afford to wait on CMC, your running back room, I would definitely take that upgrade. Pairing up Mixon and CMC would be really nice. DJ Moore does have a really good back of the year schedule. But your running back room outside of Mixon, Mason's been banged up. CMC's coming back. Like they're also going on a bye. Like his value is pretty much a handcuff at this point. It seems like Garendo might even be the number 2 at this point once CMC comes back. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be that drastic for Mason, the fall off, but ETN, he's banged up, he's splitting time, and then Pierce, and then Madison. So like you need an RB2. It seems like your receivers are decent. But I guess my question is, do you have Chuba, Javonte, and Chubb as well? Because you added them to the back end of this. I don't know if it's 2 questions. Would you deal for Chuba? Okay. Would you deal for Chuba, Javonte, and Chubb? I don't know. I'd have to look at the schedules, Anthony. I don't know what your opinion is. I think I'd rather Chuba because he can catch the ball, and I don't know if Jonathan Brooks is coming back. I don't want Javonte. Smash matchup this week, and he just looks slow. He's too inconsistent. Every time he sucks us in, he lets down. That's just been the story with him. But would you? Which one of those 3 would you deal for, and then would you trade DJ Moore for CMC?
Well, starting out with the running backs, like I'm looking at Chubb right now. This offense looks pretty good. Now, with Jameis Winston, these receivers, he had more volume this week compared to 2 weeks. His return against Cincinnati, 16 for 52, not very efficient, but Baltimore's run defense is really good. He has a tough rest of season schedule. Week 16 to 17 fantasy playoffs. Nice, but you got KC, you got Pittsburgh twice, the Chargers next week, and a bye. Not a lot of usable spots. I don't like any of these running backs. If I had to pick one, it's Chuba. But Chuba's been regressing since week 6, 15, week 7, 11, yesterday against Denver, 9. Brooks might come back, but are we sure? And if you told me Andy Dalton's 100% going to be the quarterback, then I want Chuba Hubbard. If it's going to be like we're seeing reports today, Deontay Johnson is as good as gone. That's one piece out. Like, how much of this offense is going to be Chuba reliant? And if they're going to say, hey, we need to see if we have anything with Bryce Young, Chuba's cooked because the first 2 games of the year with Bryce Young, he was useless.
Yeah.
So it's like, is there anybody else you can deal for?
Yeah. But second half of the question, DJ for CMC. I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
And I love DJ Moore. Something's off. Maybe it's his connection with Caleb Williams that's off. But like we talked about this today in the RotoWire show I do with Jim Coventry. It's like how, his years, he's on track for his worst statistical season. And he was with some bad quarterbacks in Carolina. He was with Justin Fields and it had a career year. And I know I bought a DJ Moore. It can't get any worse than Justin Fields. And somehow we're there.
Well, it's not even that like he's losing a ton of volume to other guys. Like other guys aren't like, it's not like Keenan and Rome are getting all this volume and that's what's killing DJ. The offense is just in a weird spot. Shane Waldron is just a terrorist. I do want to pop in. Daniel Wang, buddy of mine, said, "Should I keep Debo as my flex though?" Yeah, I mean, Debo as a flex, you're probably he's probably if Debo Samuel is your flex, you probably have a better flex than most people. I mean, I don't know what your other options are, but I would keep Debo at this point with Ayuk gone for the year.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, they're going to lean on him pretty hard.
The 49ers, if you watch this game, they gave him like between 2 or 4 inside the 5 carries, inside the 10 carries, opportunities to score. Dallas just didn't let that happen. I think he had a touchdown play called back on a penalty. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I know in career games without Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel's a monster.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he is the glue, and honestly, CMC coming back might scare people, but he's gonna be fine. I mean,
he's more dangerous with CMC because now you got the enemy defense focusing on CMC, and then Debo all of a sudden, like those Dallas stops inside the 5, they're worried about CMC, and Debo's walking it.
Yeah, that's kind of my thought too. Hustle Kings said, "What do we do with Rico at this point? Is he true RB1 going forward?" No. I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying drop Rico. You might as well hang on to him at this point. But it's not great right now. I mean, Zeke scored last night. Dalvin Cook could be involved more. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying Dalvin Cook is going to be a problem, but the point is it's splitting time possibly. And Rico Dowdle has really just done nothing, in my opinion, to like overtake the role. It's not that he's been bad, but like they still have this infatuation with Zeke. Like I'm not, I don't know.
For what it's worth, Rico, he's been the guy over
He
Zeke
has.
to the point where Zeke was complaining.
But
He's
then
been
when
okay in fantasy.
but when Zeke complained, then all of a sudden,
Well,
started
Rico
to get
didn't
the
play
ball
last
again.
night. He was inactive.
I know he didn't.
But like for 3 straight games, double-digit PPR points, he's being used as a receiver. Like, I'm not saying like he's a smash star.
No.
I'm just not getting rid of him. But
yeah,
you know what? I have no faith in the Cowboys right now to say, yeah, you can use him, against Atlanta, because like there's no, like, I don't have any confident spots that I would use Rico down. But you can't get rid of him either.
He does still get Carolina week 15,
Yeah.
which is the fantasy playoffs. But like he might not be that great the weeks before that, and then you're really rolling the dice with Rico Dowdle. But injuries happen. There's so much that can happen between now and then that like he might not even be the worst play, depending on how many flexes you can start and all that stuff. So I mean, obviously we both agree to hold them. One more question, and then we're going to jump into, talk a little bit about this week and talk about some specifics and some segments. But Stefan, Mr. Discount, or St. Louis fans, Mr.
STL
Discount.
fan.
Yeah, STL fans, Mr. Discount said, "Good evening. Getting offers for DJ Moore in Dynasty. Got an offer, Jerry Jeudy in a late 2025 first and a late 2026 second. Or can you tell me the value on him?" I think that's a really good offer. It depends on if you're competing or not. Like Jeudy should have decent value, but I think Cedric Tillman is the guy I want to own the rest of the season there. But I mean, if you're not really competing, I think a first and Jeudy, you might be able to flip Jeudy to somebody else this year too if he continues to play well. And you're getting a second. I don't really love picks outside of the next year, but throwing that on top, I think it's fair value for DJ Moore at this point. It just depends if you're competing and you can afford to move them. If you're competing, I'm probably not doing it, but if you're not and you're looking to sell, then I have no problem doing that.
That's a really nice offer for DJ Moore. He's not playing well right now.
Yeah.
Judy's not playing well either. But like Pete said, if you're competing, it matters to keep DJ Moore. If you're not competing, you're rebuilding, and by the looks of you wanting to accept this trade, you look like you're in a rebuild, then it doesn't matter that Jerry Jeudy is having a 3-game streak of 1 reception. You really just want those picks. And Jerry Jeudy is tied to the Browns long term. I think that's a good thing. I just don't know how good that's going to be immediately because there's so many dudes. Jameis Winston's really just playing for a week-to-week job right now. So I think long-term, I wouldn't mind Jerry Jeudy. I just don't know how great he's going to be this season because Tillman is going to be the guy, and we were seeing Elijah Moore get some love too.
Yeah. And then we have a super chat from Hustle Kings. Jamie also said, "What's up, guys? What's up, Jamie?" He said, "Should I go get Raheem Mostert and drop Rico then?" I think I'd rather Mostert rest of the season. I know he didn't have the best game yesterday, but they seem to still use him. I mean, for how strong A-Chain was, Mostert was still given the same amount of rushes, I believe, even though his production wasn't great. So yeah, I mean, I would if it's between Raheem and Rico rest of the season, I would prefer Raheem Mostert at this point.
Yeah, this was the touchdown, the running back touchdown show. A-Chan goes off over 140 total yards. He scores, has 6 of 8 targets, 6 of them caught. And then Raheem Mostert scores twice as well, but obviously he's going to be a little bit less efficient. But they had one difference in terms of rushing carries, and A-Chan dominated the receiving work. So how I see this backfield, as long as they're both healthy, I think Mostert's still going to be the guy. He's going to get most of the inside the 5 carries. A-Chan's going to dominate the receiving work.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you.
And that schedule next few Buffalo, Rams, Vegas, New England, your next 4 games. That's a really nice run if you need to use Raheem Mostert.
Yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I'm trying to see. I can't find. Oh, you know what? That's why I was looking at rushing instead of receiving. I was trying to find Lad, but we are getting another DJ Moore question from Basher or Basher. So let's just jump into it. This wasn't going to be our first topic, but since we're getting questions on him, let's just jump into our first segment here. For rest of season, you have Lad McConkey and DJ Moore, and I think it's a good question to bring up. Lad McConkey, wide receiver 20 overall, has had his bye already, which is important to note. DJ Moore, wide receiver 25, and has had his bye as well. So both of these guys have had their byes, so their stats aren't skewed for where they are in terms of the total for the season for points scored. But when looking at both of these guys, I mean, Lad is going to operate as the number one, but I mean, why don't you kind of jump in here first and then I can kind of give my side here, but who would you prefer at this point, gun to your head? Which guy are you taking rest of the season?
A lot of it depends on what my team needs because McConkey is a somewhat of a higher floor player, but he popped last game, and it was a great matchup. But he has a lot of nice matchups moving forward. This is a low volume passing team. They want to run the ball, but it does look like Lad McConkey's the guy, despite the low volume. Now, going into yesterday, 91st percentile in team targets. So he's getting 24.4% of team targets. And going into yesterday, he's 93rd. And I'm using the tools, the metrics on rotowire.com in terms of he's being targeted on 28.1% of the routes he is running. So when he's running routes, when they are throwing the ball, Lad McConkey's getting almost a quarter of the targets, which is really, really good news. They have other guys here like Quentin Johnson, Palmer. I think they had Jalen Reed run field. McConkey's the guy in this offense. When it comes to DJ Moore, he's not getting targets, right? Like to start the year, he had 3 straight games with at least 8 targets, and then 2 of those games he had double digits. Since then, he's only had 1 game with 8 targets, and then 3 out of his past 4, 6, 5, and 4, and now in the 5 and 4 comes in back-to-back games. He's had a total of 6 receptions for 47 yards in these past 2 games combined. Mind you, on paper, Jacksonville should have been a smash spot. Washington, in theory, should have been a smash spot. Rest of season schedule, there's a lot of smash spots here for DJ Moore. I just think that maybe it's a rapport issue with Caleb Williams. None of these receivers are really going off. We're seeing some games, like if you go back, like Komet's having some good yardage. DeAndre Swift is picking up those chunks which could be inflating the throwing yards for Caleb Williams. But I think I might rather have Lad McConkey because I trust his quarterback more. Lower volume, but it's a more efficient passing attack. And again, DJ Moore has a better schedule, but Lad, Cleveland, which they're 26th, Baltimore 31st, Atlanta 25th, Tampa 28th, New England 20th. So there's some usable spots here. Like if you have DJ Moore, you look at the schedule, you're like, how can I sit this guy? Well, I get it. The schedule looks how can you sit him, but his recent production tells me how do you play him.
Yeah, I get it. From a target standpoint, they're really not that far off. I mean, 45 for Lad, 51 for DJ Moore. And right now they're projecting them to both have the same amount of targets on the rest of the season here. 72 for DJ Moore, 69 for Lad. DJ Moore is expected to have 100 more yards, 3 more catches, and 1 more touchdown. I prefer DJ Moore at this juncture of the season. I think both guys should be very good. I think Lad can only get better, so there's that untapped potential. And his schedule's pretty good. I mean, Lad McConkey gets the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the fantasy, the first week of the fantasy playoffs. He gets Cleveland this week, who, I mean, they've been 26 when it comes to points given up to the wide receiver position. They still get Baltimore. They still get Atlanta. And then they get the Patriots in week 17 of the fantasy playoffs, which is the championship. They do play Denver and they do play Kansas City and they get Tennessee. Denver would be the semifinals. But DJ Moore, man, I mean, his schedule is just too good to ignore. They're going to figure it out. I feel like, this Washington, this Bears team has taken advantage when they've played bad teams. Like that's kind of been my takeaway. Like when they've played bad teams, they've taken advantage of it. Caleb should get better. It was a bad game, like kind of just one of those where you just throw it out the window. And for DJ Moore, it's tough, right? Like you've had 3 games where he has scored. I mean, he's had 27, 20, and 22 yards. Like that's frustrating. Totally get it. But the upside is just there. I mean, he plays Detroit, he plays Minnesota, he plays Detroit and Minnesota again. He gets Minnesota and Detroit in the first 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. Like, I just, to me, I don't think you can go wrong with either guy. But I personally, if you had Lad and somebody liked him, I would be totally fine sending him over to the DJ Moore owner and seeing if they pull the trigger. But I can understand the argument for both sides. I just think like he's not out targeting DJ Moore right now. They're pretty close. And so because of that, give me the guy with the better schedule and just the higher upside. And I also, I mean, he plays he's at Detroit in a dome. He's at Minnesota in a dome. He's in San Francisco, which should be nice weather. Like, so I just prefer DJ Moore. But is there any last thoughts for you there before we move to the next topic?
It's close. Like I said, like I think I favor Lad, and usually the deal breaker for me is the quarterback. And again, he has some nice spots. DJ Moore is probably the smarter play. Like if you need the upside play rest of season, then DJ Moore, you would think in theory he's going to figure it out. Him and Caleb Williams going to figure it out. So it just depends on what your team. If you just need that little bit more stability, maybe you go Lad McConkey. If you say like, okay, my team needs some upside, it needs some ceiling, it needs a guy who can go out and put up a 25-point game a few weeks in a row, then I think that's DJ Moore.
Sure. Yeah. Let's move on to the next topic. We have some questions in the chat, but we'll get to some of you guys once we get into this next topic. And if it's a rush, just send a super chat and we'll make it a priority. But the next topic I wanted to move to here would be rest of season, Cade Otton and David Njoku. Both of these guys are playing extremely well. Cade Otton had had a 2 touchdown game this week, I believe. Am I wrong in assuming? I think it was 2 touchdowns. Yeah.
Yep.
2 touchdowns. Njoku has just been getting better and better. It seems like every single week. And with Jameis Winston, I mean, like you kind of want pieces in this offense when looking at, Jameis Winston throwing the football. Who do you prefer at this point in time, rest of the season? I mean, Baker, better quarterback. Jameis Winston, more gunslinger. I mean, do you lean one way or the other? Or are you indifferent? Like, where do you see this at this point?
Starting with David Njoku, he has a nice rest of season schedule. At this point, we're looking at playoffs. If you're that type of a team that's going to make it, or you think you're going to make it, rest of season schedule matters. What also matters is, okay, like you have the quarterback change. The entire Cleveland offense, especially throwing the football, it looks completely different. It looks efficient. And David Njoku, he's being used even in week 6 with Deshaun Watson. He's had at least 7 targets in 3 straight games, 14 against Cincinnati. That's an anomaly. That's not going to happen every week. But we know he's a really good tight end when he's getting volume. Gets a little bit banged up, but rest of season stretch, I would call it a fairly strong schedule. You get Pittsburgh twice, Denver's middle of the pack. KC's the easiest tight end matchup. Cincy again. So, it's there. And again, Jameis Winston injects life, injects competency in this passing attack, something that Cleveland has not had with Deshaun. We go to Cade Otton. There is pure opportunity here. Chris Godwin in that power slot role, he looked like he was going to have a career year. Take away that Chris Godwin role, who's going to suck up those middle of the field targets? Cade Otton's been the guy, right? Of course, Mike Evans going to come back, and maybe Jalen McMillan plays well. But if you look at these two games, when Godwin was hurt, career highs. Week 7 against Baltimore, mind you, career highs, 8 receptions, 100 yards, 10 targets. This past game, another 10 targets, goes 9 for 81 and 2. Without Mike Evans, there's only one guy with the starting rapport with Baker Mayfield in this offense. That's Cade Otton. And it's not just, the recent production. If you go back, Cade Otton, he started slow, but in weeks 3 and 4, he had 8 and 9 targets. When he's getting this type of a volume, he's going for double-digit PPR points. And now I think the ceiling is even higher. This defense, they're okay against the run. They cannot stop the pass, which means they're going to have to throw. We saw that yesterday. There's going to be a lot of shootouts. They're going to have to throw to stay in games. They're going to have to throw to try to win games. And, I don't love this schedule, but just like with Njoku, you get KC once, and Njoku gets KC once. Coming out of the bye week, you get Carolina twice, the second easiest matchup. So you get the second easiest matchup twice, the easiest matchup once, and you get Dallas and the Chargers and Vegas. Like, I think I slightly love Cade. I don't want to say slightly lean. I think I love Cade Otton the rest of the season. I think everything screams he's the guy you want.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think kind of like the conversation before. I don't really, by the way, there's some breaking news. I'll get to it after this, but, yeah, I mean, Cade Otton, you can't go wrong with either of these guys. They're both playing extremely well. They're both going to have big roles. Even when Mike Evans comes back, I think Cade Otton should be viable. But yeah, I mean, to your point, like, I think he's also going to be in higher scoring games, based on, the Buccaneers defense is just not that great. Like you said, they play Carolina. I mean, he gets Carolina twice, once in the championship. He gets Dallas. That should be a higher scoring game. He gets the Raiders, not a high scoring game, but, their defense is not that great. And, you have Njoku, right, who gets Kansas City, but then it's Pittsburgh, Denver, Pittsburgh again, and then the Saints. Like, doesn't feel like those are going to be high scoring games. Now, they get Cincinnati, KC, and Miami. Njoku. So, like, to me, that's exciting. Plus, you have the possibility of David Njoku getting traded. This is a possibility. Like, this team, they're going against the Chargers this week. They're 2-6 right now. They go to 2-7. Team like Denver, one of these teams that is in need of a tight end, like, may go out and try to acquire him. Like, I mean, so I personally prefer Njoku because of the big playability. I think both guys are in good spots. But to me, like, there is still the worry. I know we talked to Mike Evans and, like, he's coming back. It doesn't scare me that much. But, like, Mike Evans is still a target, a guy that's going to get targeted in the red zone. Njoku will be the focal point in the red zone. Otton has to worry about Rachaad White, who catches a lot of passes and can get into the end zone too.
But
And some of these, yeah, they have Nick Chubb, but I'm not too worried about Chubb. I mean, he hasn't looked great yet, which, I mean, shocker, right? Like, we didn't expect Nick Chubb to come out of the gate swinging, but he hasn't looked great, like, either, so I don't know. It's close. I prefer Njoku. I think Otton's a good value play too. You probably got him for practically nothing, and picked him up on waivers. So you're probably happy either way, whichever guy you have. Now let's head up in here and check the comments out for some questions.
We said we have breaking news.
Oh yeah, we do. Well, Justin Fields will be inactive tonight due to a hamstring injury. Now, I don't really know how he injured his hamstring, Maybe he was in practice. I don't really know. That's kind of strange considering he didn't play last week and he wasn't injured. That wasn't the reason he didn't play. So I don't really know. It seems kind of odd to make him inactive.
I saw that they were also going to use him as the emergency quarterback. So
Okay.
take that for what you will.
If he's the emergency quarterback, then and he's injured, I mean, that's like the Jameis Winston where they benched him with Deshaun Watson, and then all of a sudden he's healthy and can play. Like, so weird, but whatever. We don't have to spend.
Maybe, and maybe it's crazy. I get because they're into this quarterback room for little money. Maybe they're deactivating him because they're in trade talks with somebody.
Could be. I mean, let's think for a second. Who would he make? Maybe the Giants. I'm not saying the Giants aren't trying to play for anything, but like you could take a team like the Giants who maybe trades for a cheap contract, sees if Fields could be the guy, and then maybe makes a decision. I'm just using that as an example.
Is there a world, or am I nuts, that Deontay Johnson goes back to Steelers because they need a wide receiver too? And somehow Justin Fields ends up in Carolina because Carolina needs to see if they need a quarterback.
I think it sounds nuts, but crazier things have happened. I don't think it's gonna happen, but I'm just saying,
like
I could see it. I mean, I'm just trying to think of who else. Like maybe a contender like tries to trade for Fields because they want, but like, why would the Steelers then trade him to begin with? I mean, they're technically a contender, depending on what your definition of that is. So strange, but
maybe Russ is throwing tantrums.
No, all right, let's get to Noah here. He said, I'm in need of a running back, and I get 2 offers from different people. Offer number 1, Smith and Chase Brown for Aaron Jones. I'm going to assume that's Devonta Smith and Chase Brown for Aaron Jones. Offer number 2, T. Higgins and Devonta Smith for Monty and DJ Moore. I can afford to give up my receivers. So let's look at the first one. I mean, Smith and Chase Brown feels like a good amount to give up for Aaron Jones, who already got hurt this year. I do love Aaron Jones, but I don't know if I think I prefer the second deal if I was going to do one or the other. I would prefer Monty and DJ Moore for Devonta and Higgins, who Higgins is already banged up too. And Devonta Smith is kind of unpredictable right now. I prefer DJ Moore rest of the season over Devonta. And then I think Monty for Higgins is extremely fair. So I think the second offer is solid. I would take the second offer if I was going to pick one of the two. Do you take either of these at all?
Devonta and for what Jones is that?
It's Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
And is he getting Devonta Smith?
He's giving up Devonta Smith and Chase Brown.
No, I don't like that. And then Higgins and Devonta for Monty and Moore. The only player I would really want incoming is David Montgomery, but I'm not willing to give up. I'm not willing to give up Devonta Smith. Honestly, it's more Devonta Smith than T. Higgins. Like I think people are for some reason low on Devonta Smith when this has been his most. I get he had the stinker against the Giants. That game was a blowout. They didn't really have to throw, but this has been like Devonta Smith has always been a high. Like he's a better best ball player. He's actually given us his highest floor season I think ever this year.
Yeah. I mean I think it's more the frustration of just the Eagles' offense a little bit too. You know they're just like. I mean, they got it going a little bit this week. It's just been frustrating to watch at times. You know, we knew the tush push was still going to be a thing, but I mean, like Jalen Hurts and my thing is this, and this is kind of a sidebar, but to close out this question, would you do either of these deals?
No.
Yeah, I like offer number 2. I really don't hate it. I think DJ Moore and Smith. I mean, what's DJ Moore and Smith on the year? I mean, Devonta missed some time, but how off are they from each other right now? And could you do Monty for Higgins straight up? Like, can you just get away with doing that? because I would do that. If you don't have to give up Smith for DJ Moore, like I'm comfortable if Anthony thinks that that's better. Like I'm comfortable doing that too.
On a points per game basis, DJ Moore is the 31 and Devonta Smith is 18.
But what is the difference? Like, is it drastic? Like, what
it's about, or do you want total points?
No, just give me the points. Give me the average
points. It's 14.6 for Devonta, and then DJ Moore is 12.4. So a little, roughly 2 points.
Yeah, it's not drastic, to me. But let's just say if he could do Higgins for Monty, fair?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we're on the same page with that at least. All right, let's answer a couple more here, and then we'll jump into our next section here. Trone Force, Jaden Daniels' last second Hail Mary won me my week. My chance at winning percentage went from 12 to 91 on that one play, saved me from going 2-6. Well, I'm glad it saved you from going 2-6 because I went 2-6, and I have Jaden Daniels in my league that I have him. But happy that you're happy. Jay Smells said, thoughts on team, what to work on. Have loved Neighbors, Metcalf, Olave, Puka, BTJ, Deontay, McBride, Pitts, Hall, A-Chain, Pollard, Brooks. I feel like I need a running back. Yeah, I mean, you look, A-Chain, we talked about it, right? Like, I mean, yesterday he showed us, like, with Tua back, this guy should be locked in top 12, maybe even top 5 rest of the way. It's not that hot of a take. Now Breece Hall up and down a little bit. Maybe you could get an upgrade at running back and take one of these receivers that you have, like BTJ, who's going to miss a couple of weeks. Maybe you take him and you take like a Tony Pollard and you send that over to somebody else and try to get an upgrade at running back. Like, that would be my advice, but I don't know where you land. Or take Olave and send him if you're comfortable waiting on BTJ.
I wouldn't move BTJ. I think his value when he comes back, because no Christian Kirk, is sky high. Olave I would move, but unless you're finding a buyer who's obsessed with the name of Chris Olave, like, we're banking on Derek Carr coming back and hopefully hyper targeting him the way he was using Rashid Shaheed. I think the player that you can get the most out of it is Neighbors.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna, quite frankly, like, I'm worried. I've said this to Pete offline. I've said to a lot of people, like, I'm worried about Malik Neighbors moving forward because of this offensive line with the Giants. That Andrew Thomas loss made Daniel Jones look like the old Daniel Jones, where this year he looked good, he looked competent. A lot of that's because he had time. Yeah. Can they recover from Andrew Thomas? I don't know. And tonight's going to be really telling. So I would see how everything goes tonight. And if we get another, I think Neighbors is so polarizing where he can have another okay game and you could still get a nice ransom for him. Where you pair him with Pollard and maybe you're getting a significant running back upgrade. But, like, you could also, you have Paul.
He could probably stand pat too.
What can you get? Like what can you get? Like, maybe you send Olave to the Isaiah Pacheco owner.
It's interesting. I just worry, like, we looked at Tony Pollard last year with that broken that ankle kind of thing, and like it took him a little bit. Like, I don't think it's not the same injury with Pacheco, but I don't think it's a bad. I think at that point, I think I would just rather hang tight. Like, to me, you can't start all these receivers. So I think Olave is a fine guy to move, and Pollard and upgrade somewhere. I don't know if it would be Pacheco. I'd go for Monty. I'd prefer Monty over Pacheco if you can make that deal. The one thing I wanted to talk about with Brian Thomas Jr. is, they're saying 2 to 4 weeks. He has a bye in 4 weeks. Well, we normally see 2 to 4 weeks. He's probably out for the next 2. We don't know yet, but like that's what it sounds like. He's going to miss Philly. He's going to miss Minnesota. He's going to those are 2 solid matchups. Minnesota 32 in points per game given up. Then Detroit. This would be week 3, the 3rd week from today. Probably I wouldn't expect them to play him either unless they somehow start becoming a contender, which I don't think is going to happen because they have a bye the following week.
Yeah.
So, like, what is forcing their hand to put a young star out there in a season that's probably lost? We're probably, unfortunately, looking at 4 weeks of no Brian Thomas Jr. And then his schedule is Houston. That's the best matchup he gets. Then he gets Tennessee, 4th against receivers. The Jets, 2nd against receivers. Las Vegas, who's shockingly 8th against receivers. And then Tennessee again, who's 4th against receivers. He's got a tough schedule. The only thing I will give Brian Thomas Jr. is he has been able to score fantasy points, even in the matchups that seem like they're going to be difficult. But it is something to think about depending on how desperate you are to win games. But neither here nor there. Alicia said, what am I going to do with Hall? Aaron Rodgers just refuses to use him, it seems. Yeah, this was a weird week. Breece Hall as a running back, his shares and target shares over the last 3 games. Week 6, 86 when it comes to rushing, 86% share, 18 in the pass game. Week 7, 80% rush share, 23 in the pass game. And then week 8, this past week, 57% rushing, 12% in the pass game. So he saw lows in the last 3 weeks. And we thought this was possibly a turn with the new coaching staff when Saleh got let go. It was kind of like, hey, Braylon Allen doesn't seem like they're using him that much. But then for some reason, it's like this Jets team. It's like they just want to push a different button every week just to kind of figure out, like, can we win this way? Oh, no, can we win this way? Like, I don't get it with this team. And I know we have some thoughts on the Jets, but is there anything that you feel like, I mean, are you worried about Breece Hall and then your overall outlook on the Jets? I mean, in like a 60-second take, like, what's your feelings on them?
Well, when it comes to Breece, he has possibly, you look at rest of season running back schedules outside of Houston this week, it's 27, 21, 22, 23, 31, 20, 29.
Yeah.
Like really good matchups. I get New England was a good matchup, but like something, this steers me into what's going on with the Jets. I don't think they should have ever moved off of Saleh. I get Saleh's not a great head coach, but his defense was carrying this team. The defense was not the problem this year. The problem was because if you remember the rumors, Saleh took away play calling duties from Nat Hackett. Somebody called the owner, and all of a sudden, Saleh gets fired, and then the new head coach takes the play calling duties away and gives him to Todd Downing.
Yeah, it's so weird.
It's like you make amends with Haskins. Meanwhile, you lose your top pass rusher in week 1.
Hassan Reddick, yes.
It's like they were trying to bury Saleh for some reason, and maybe it was Aaron. Who knows? But like Aaron Rodgers and I love Aaron Rodgers. I'm the biggest Aaron Rodgers apologist on this planet. He is shooting himself in the foot every day with this football team.
Yeah, I was same boat with you. I love Aaron Rodgers.
Before you go, when you were saying on Twitter, like, not like Saleh was good. That defense played for Saleh.
They sure did. It wasn't a Robert Saleh thing. The fans wanted a pound of flesh. Woody Johnson cop out. His excuse was, hey, I didn't hire this guy. If you remember, he was like overseas for some sort of like ambassador shit that he does. Yeah. And so because of that, I think his son or somebody in his family ended up doing the hiring for Saleh. But to me, this long, like, you should have done it in the offseason. But there's a culture issue with this team. Like, and it starts with Woody Johnson. It really does. Aaron Rodgers, I've lost respect for him, and honestly, I've always liked Aaron Rodgers. I've always defended him. I've always felt like people's feelings about him have always been outside of football and not just about football. I've always liked him, but it's just this year has soured me on him. It just feels like it's kind of like, hey, let's try this, let's try that. This didn't work this week. Okay, Devontae Adams is here. Oh, okay, we lost last week. Okay, well, Braylon Allen, and it was working with Breece Hall. Now Braylon Allen's going to get 50% of this. Like, it just the week before that. Oh, let's fire Robert Saleh. It's not work. Like, it's like every single week. It's like we're doing something new to like fix this team, and the talent is there. So it's just, I mean, I just this offensive line was supposed to be good. It was Morgan Moses was phenomenal before he came over. They lost Tyron Smith. No, Tyron Smith has been playing actually, I believe.
They lost Tucker, right? Vera
They
Tucker
lost
again.
Morgan Moses. They lost
Yeah.
Moses, and then Fashanu came in, and he's been rough.
Yeah.
But this offensive line was supposed to be good. I mean, even before Moses went down, it didn't look good. So like Fashanu, one of the top picks in the draft, like he's a rookie, I get it, but like he looks like a train wreck too. So there is such an issue. Coaching matters so much, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate for Saleh. We see this a lot with defensive coaches. Like they just if you don't have an offensive guy that you trust on the other side of the ball, like you're not going to last long unless you just have a quarterback like an Aaron Rodgers who can run the offense, but it just hasn't been there. He doesn't look healthy either. He doesn't look healthy. I don't think he is healthy. I'm not talking about the Achilles, but like he's gotten beat the fuck up this year, man.
They were in better shape last year with Wilson.
I know. I know.
And
I know. All right, so let's move on to our next segment here. We still have some comments. We'll get to some of you guys. Just hang tight. Second one is a little bit more of an interesting one. Cedric Tillman. He has been. I mean, the last 2 weeks, at least with Jameis Winston, he's had 9 targets. This week, he had 9 targets, 7 receptions for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. With Jameis Winston under center, which, mind you, Jameis Winston didn't play the full game last week. Not this week that just passed, the week before. He came in late. And he's had 21 targets under center from Jameis Winston. This is the kind of guy that you just love for fantasy when it comes to Jameis Winston. If you own a receiver, that's why Njoku gets a bump up. Cedric Tillman, though, can he be a wide receiver too going forward rest of the season, in your opinion? And do you trust him over Jerry Jeudy at this point too? I mean, where are you at? Is the hype too much? Do you need to see more from Tillman? Like, where are you at with him?
Well, number one, Jerry Jeudy was actually playing his best football with Deshaun Watson, and when Amari Cooper was there, he was getting volume. For the past few games, Jerry Jeudy 3, 6, and 8 targets on him. He's combined for 8 receptions, and that's Jerry Jeudy since week 5. Cedric Tillman now in the past 2 games, 21 combined targets. I think 170, if my math's right, 180 total yards. 15 receptions, 2 touchdowns. He's playing the second most snaps in the wide receiver room next to Jeudy. It just seems like he has a rapport with Jameis Winston. I think the narrative, I guess the word I'm looking for, Cedric Tillman was the wide receiver 4 to open the year. Well, who was he working most with quarterback-wise? Probably Jameis Winston.
Good point.
So there's a rapport there.
Good point.
From practice squad and playing the number 1 defense. And we are seeing this immediate rapport between these two guys. You got to remember, it was Elijah Moore, Cooper, and Jeudy as your top 3. You remove Cooper, in comes Tillman, in comes Winston, and you have this instant rapport. And we see this a lot when a backup quarterback comes in. They're going to target the guy that they practice with the most. So I think this is real. Now you got some iffy games like this Chargers game, like they're number 1 against enemy wide receivers, but this is also like Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy, and Cedric Tillman. Tillman's a 3rd round pick. Elijah Moore, I forget where he was drafted, but his rookie year with the Jets, he looked like the real deal. And Jerry Jeudy was a 1st round pick out of Alabama. This is a talented wide receiver room. You got Njoku, you got Chubb, you got a quarterback who can throw it. Maybe they give the Chargers some fits. And there's some use of there's it's a tough run of matchups, but I just think I don't think Jameis Winston gives a damn about matchup. I think Jameis Winston is just going to go out there. It's not like he's playing for a starting job. I think he knows what his role is. So every time he gets an opportunity, he's just going to go out there, have fun, and throw. He's like Flacco at this point. He's just going to go throw the football. I don't give a shit if you're number 1. Against passing, like I'm going to go out there and I'm going to throw the ball to the open guy. I have nothing to lose, and that's Jameis Winston. So yeah, I'm in on Tillman. I think he's the number 1 priority player on waivers this week.
Yeah. I mean, Elijah Moore too. 12 targets last week. I mean, 8 catches, 85 yards. Like I'm happy to see it for him. I think Cedric Tillman is probably a flex play and has wide receiver 2 upside, probably low end wide receiver 2 upside. But I mean, you practically got him probably for nothing. So I mean, I expect Tillman to play well going forward. Yes, tough matchup against the Chargers. Then he gets the Saints. He's got Pittsburgh and Denver, Pittsburgh, and then he has KC and Cincinnati. But I mean, we're not talking should you trade him, should you not trade him. I mean, somebody may fall in love with him, and then maybe you do trade him. But I like him rest of the season for sure.
And I get this might not. This is not going to be maintained. At least I mean, we've seen weirder stuff. But in the past 2 games, Cedric Tillman's the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy points per game. He's averaging 23.5 fantasy points per game through 2 games.
Yeah. And I mean, targeted on 22.4% of his routes. That's pretty good. So yeah, I mean, Tillman, good for him getting his opportunity and making the most out of it. Since we're talking Browns here, why don't we just shift the focus to our next topic, which is Jameis Winston or Bo Nix rest of season. Now, for those that are listening, to those that watch the show, guys, I'm a Broncos fan. I'm actually wearing a Broncos hat right now. So, maybe there's some bias, and Anthony has no dog in this fight. But Jameis Winston right now, quarterback 10 this week, 23.6 fantasy points. Bo Nix coming off probably his best week of his career. Quarterback 2, 29.8 fantasy points. I'm going to make the case here for Bo Nix, 28 for 34, 284 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, 3 passing, 1 rushing. Like I said, QB2 on the week, and he's actually been quarterback 3 since week 5, trailing just Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield. And I mean, if you watch the game, there was a lot of meat left on the bone. Wide receivers dropped pass. I mean, Sutton dropped like a 30-yard pass. Jordan Humphreys dropped a pass that he probably would have scored a touchdown. It would have been a 35-yarder. Troy Franklin dropped a big pass that went through his hands twice for 30-plus yards. Like, there were plays to be made. And so, yeah, I mean, Bo Nix, the one thing that was encouraging is didn't really run the ball this week. I mean, 5 carries, 4 yards. Now he scored 1 time, but he showed us this week that, like, he doesn't have to run to be successful in fantasy football. I mean, 25, 24, 15, 32. Those are his last 4 weeks. I think he's a really good play against Baltimore this week. He's 31st against quarterbacks, and they're giving up really big plays. They're top 5 when it comes to 20-yard passing plays, which is explosive plays. That's when you see that explosive stat, like that's what it's considered, 20-plus or more passing yards or 20-plus yards through the air. They give up a lot of those plays, and Bo Nix is top 10 right now in air yards. Top 10. Check down Bo Nix. The guy that everybody said couldn't throw down the field is now top 10 in air yards per throw. So, yeah, I mean, I prefer Nix rest of the season. I can understand the Winston argument. The one thing that worries me is Winston could lose a target like Njoku. And if Nick Chubb does end up playing well, maybe that lowers possibly the production. But I expect both of these guys to be good for fantasy. They're both going to have their weeks. They're probably going to be matchup dependent, most likely. But I don't know. I lean Nix. I'm biased, but looking at the schedule, he gets Atlanta, he gets Las Vegas, he gets the Colts, he gets the Chargers, and then he gets the Bengals in the playoffs, those 3. So decent schedule. But what about you? Am I homering right now?
Well,
is it close?
I mean, I was in on Nix all offseason. I liked Nix. I didn't expect what we're seeing now, but I think Bo Nix is going to develop into a nice quarterback. But I'm going to start with Russell Wilson here.
Russell Wilson or Winston?
Wait, are we doing Russell? Or
it was Winston.
For some reason, I thought we were going, okay.
I mean, you could throw Russ in there and add him in. We could do a 3-way.
No, let's go to Winston. For some reason, I thought we were in the doc in the show sheet. I saw Russell Wilson. That's my dyslexia, seeing what I want to see.
Yeah, good.
But okay, so let's start with Winston. Tougher schedule down the stretch. We just talked about. I think Tillman's going to be a thing. I like the weapons. When it comes to experience, because I guess you can throw Russell Wilson here. When it comes to weapons, when it comes to experience, you would think Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, right? Because these were all technically waiver wire quarterbacks we're talking about. I think they're better than Bo Nix. Sure. I think there's also going to be volatility with these veteran quarterbacks, especially Jameis Winston, because he's going to make mistakes. And if he makes mistakes and you're in a league that deducts for interceptions, then that puts you at a liability at times, right? Because he lost a fumble against Baltimore. We know Jameis Winston in his best fantasy year, I think he almost threw as many interceptions as touchdowns that year against Tampa. So we have to factor that into the mix. Let's go to Bo Nix, because Bo Nix is clearly my answer here, the guy I want rest of season. You said since week 5, he was what, quarterback?
He's quarterback 3 in points since week 5.
Yeah. Well, even since week 3, he's a QB7.
Yeah.
Bo Nix has been productive. He's been a QB9 or better in 3 out of the past 4 games. He brings a high rushing floor. He also scores rushing touchdowns. But what we saw finally, I think you alluded to this week, he threw for a season high, obviously career high, 284 yards and 3 touchdowns. This is a player who didn't throw a touchdown in the first 3 games of his career. He has now thrown for 8 touchdowns in 5 games since week 4. There is no, when we look at Winston, we look at Pickens, right? Like there are players, okay, like we have to get Pickens the ball. We need to get, Njoku involved. We need to get these guys involved. I don't think Bo Nix plays with that mentality because their best receivers, Cortland Sutton, he went without a target last week for the first time in his career. I don't think Bo Nix cares. He's just going to give the ball to the open guy. We're seeing, Troy Franklin might get involved. We've seen Sutton get involved last week. We've seen Vele get involved. Kroll, the tight end, get involved 2 weeks ago. Troutman. It just doesn't seem to matter.
Nate Atkins, Kroll, and Troutman.
Right.
I think
it just doesn't seem to matter to Bo Nix.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the coaching edge to obviously Sean Payton, what he can do to develop quarterbacks. And Bo Nix, he's gone 2 games now without a turnover. He has not lost a fumble all year. He actually has not put the ball on the ground all year.
Yeah.
So I think rest of season fantasy wise, I don't think it's close. I want Bo Nix.
Yeah, he's also the least sacked quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
He's not taking sacks. I do want a victory lap slightly because 2 weeks ago I did post before the Saints game and I said, he's quarterback 13 on the season. Why are we not talking about Bo Nix when it comes to picking him up possibly? And a lot of people said because he's not a good quarterback, and a lot of people shit on me saying, well, he hasn't had his bye week yet. And so because of that, it's inflated. All these things. And I mean, his schedule is very favorable. I mean, the playoffs, he gets the Colts and he gets Cincinnati 21-29. Now he gets the Chargers. But against the Chargers, he scored 24 points earlier on this year. So, I mean, I'm not worried about that. And Jameis Winston, for what it's worth, he plays Pittsburgh, he plays Denver, he plays Pittsburgh again. He gets Miami, who's number 1 against the quarterback, and he still plays Kansas City. Now he gets Cincinnati in the playoffs, but I mean, he gets Miami in the championship. Now, I don't know if you're starting Jameis Winston in the championship, but I mean, weirder things are happening. But I would feel more comfortable probably starting Nix because the upside is there with the legs. And he showed us that he doesn't need to do it with his legs to produce for fantasy for us. He did rush one in, but
I think how I would assess these 3 quarterbacks is where Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston, they're streamers. If you're asking me, hey, I'm a Patrick Mahomes owner. I don't trust him. Who's the quarterback that I want to add and have on my team? It's Bo Nix. Those other 2 are streamers.
Yeah, that's a fair point as well. Definitely a fair point. So, I mean, we have some questions in here. I don't know who else is still here. Resend your question in if you're here and we will answer. Oh, well, Hustle Kings just sent us a super chat, so we'll grab that. He said, do you guys like Khalil Shakir as a wide receiver 2 going forward? Now, this is a good question because, I mean, I'm the one out of this entire show who 3 weeks ago advocated for Khalil Shakir to be the guy that's traded. Trade him, wide receiver 19. He had a great week this week. He had a good week last week. I think I want to say he has, I don't know if it's that he scored, 10 plus fantasy points in every matchup that he's been in, but like this was the case for him. I mean, like he didn't have when I said to trade him, he didn't have a great schedule. And then I said I would buy back in later on in the year. This is pretty much the time where his schedule starts to lighten up. And right now we're seeing that like Keon Coleman looks good. Dalton Kincaid's been all right, but like Shakir is, I don't know, wide receiver 2. I would say he's a good flex play rest of season. I would prefer Tillman over Shakir rest of season, in my opinion, because I think the upside's there. And now you could say that he still has target competition. Tillman, he has Njoku, he's got Jerry Jeudy, and he also has Elijah Moore, who just had 12 targets last week. But I would prefer a guy like Tillman. I think the upside is there. But I think Shakir is probably more like a flex play. If he's your wide receiver 2, let me phrase it like this. If he's your wide receiver 2 on your team, you probably have issues. And that's not a knock on him. But as a wide receiver 2, like I am not looking at him and I'm not excited if he's my wide receiver 2, unless I have like CeeDee Lamb as my wide receiver 1 and my running back room is stacked. So Anthony, am I off here? Am I hating on it? Hating too much? Like,
I don't see the problem with Khalil Shakir being a wide receiver too, right? Because you note his numbers in the past 2 games.
Yeah.
Well, Keon Coleman is also, because this is Shakir's 2 best games, really. Yeah. Well, this is also Keon Coleman's 2 best games. And everybody wants to say it's because of Amari Cooper. And we talked about this on the show with Jim today. And I asked Jim why, because I was kind of stumped, because Amari Cooper has played 18 and 35 snaps. So why are we seeing this type of production when he's barely on the field with these guys? And Jim said game planning, because the other team, they don't know that how many snaps Amari Cooper is going to play, but you need to game plan for Amari Cooper. And that opens up the offense for these guys. So unfortunately, like we're going to see a point where maybe they cannibalize each other, where right now these two are hyper productive. But once Amari Cooper's acclimated enough and he's playing a full complement of snaps, then it's going to be Cooper, I would say, every week. And then one of Shakir or Coleman.
Or Kincaid.
So
and James Cook also, Cook catches the ball too.
So I think there's a cannibalization here once we get the full complement of Amari Cooper. So it's, let's say if Coleman went down, sure, I think Shakir is a locked and loaded wide receiver too. But because you have to kind of deal with both, then I think they're both flex plays.
Yeah, and one more thing here. Keon Coleman hit a 21.9% target share. This is per Late Round Quarterback on Twitter. Keon Coleman hit a 21.9% target share last week, which was a season high. He saw another 21.9 target share. Last week and this week. So both weeks in the last 2 weeks, he saw 21.9% target share, ties a season high, and he scored a season best 18 PPR points. Shakir has scored 10 PPR points in all but 1 game this year. He tallied a season high at 19.9 PPR points and had a 31% target share, which is the first time he's gone over 30% on his career. But to Anthony's point, I think they cannibalize each other unless there's an injury. And I look, Keon Coleman, like we talked about this, like that was the worry. Does Keon Coleman become a better receiver in the second half? First round wide first round wide receiver. Yeah, they took him in the first. No, they took him in the first. They traded back and then they drafted him. Yeah. But it was Leggett it was I think it was Carolina. They may have taken him 33 or 32 because they did trade. They made those trade backs or whatever, and then they gave Worthy to the Chiefs. But regardless, the point is, we expected Keon Coleman.
He was a 33rd overall pick, so he's a fringe first rounder, really.
Yeah. But how about Curtis Samuel, right? I just want to say, like, how much hype was there that Curtis Samuel was going to be a good player for them and a thorn in the side? Is he even on the field, dude? Like, I don't.
People should have known better.
I agree.
That bit bite that bait again.
I completely agree. We do have a super chat from Chris Warren, and then we'll get to some of your questions that are here as well. He said $2 super in and said, should I trade Olave for Puka 10-team PPR? Yes. Easy, quick. Yes. I would do that in a heartbeat, especially 10-man. Like, you're looking for more elite players. Puka is just a higher upside guy. I mean, this is a no-brainer to me.
Yep, I think that's a significant upgrade because, like, we know Puka, they were saying he was going to be limited, and if he was limited and he still gave us that production, like, and for what's worth, like Cooper Kupp, he just doesn't look right. And I, I get he's wide receivers last a little bit longer, but he's a beat up 31-year-old wide receiver. He has a lot of wear and tear.
Yeah. Yeah, he does. He does. I don't think Kupp will get traded either. I know that was floated around at some point. But yeah, it's a good question. I think Puka, though, like a guy that limited and they did what they did with him, like I think he's going to be the power slot role in this offense. I think he's the number one at this point, and it's nothing against Kupp. I just Puka is a smash the rest of the way. Hustle Kings, appreciate it.
He only played 35 snaps.
I know. And in limited time, he was still phenomenal. I think he had 19 fantasy points.
Yeah.
So Hustle King said, so go. Chris said, thanks, guys. Yeah, no problem, man. Hustle King said, so go after Downs or Cedric. He sent in another super chat. We appreciate it. This is tough. Man, my heart says Cedric Tillman. And it sucks because I am such a Josh Downs guy. He did have the big touchdown this week. And for what it's worth, in 4 out of the 6 games he's played this year, he's had 15 fantasy points. The volatility in that room with the quarterback situation. I mean, Anthony Richardson didn't even throw him a good ball. He was wide open and it wasn't even a good throw. It worries me. If you're telling me, gun to my head, if we find out that if Flacco gets named the starter this week, okay, that means he's not giving it up unless he gets hurt. There's no way they bench Richardson after benching Flacco and then go back to Richardson.
There are rumors like that it's going to happen, though.
I know there is.
They named the quarterback yet.
So, I mean, if you're giving me Joe Flacco for down, give me Downs. Less competition, in my opinion, and we've seen the connection. I prefer Downs. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I prefer Downs as well, but when we look at the targets and the catch rate with Flacco, and then last week against Houston, the numbers look the same. Yeah. Right? He had 9 targets, 100 yards, scores, 22 fantasy points. They look the same. But if you go to the 22.2, which is exactly what he scored in week 4, he had 9 targets, but he caught 8 for 82 and 1. This week, he caught 4 for 109. Without that big play, you're having not a great week. And I think the quarterback does play a big role, even though Anthony Richardson may have targeted him 9 times. There were not a lot of catchable balls there. Where we know Jameis Winston can support fantasy wide receivers. He's done it his whole career. So I think the safer is Tillman. And again, we talked about it earlier. Jameis was a number 2 quarterback. Cedric was a number 1 practice receiver. So I think that matters.
So do I. Yeah, I think it matters too. I mean, he said go after Downs and Cedric. So I guess you could probably, if you can get them both, for sure. Yeah. And if you watch the show, me and Anthony have been in love with Josh Downs all year. It's always been about the quarterback position. Mr. Wumbo said there are people that have owned Downs or Pittman that don't want them, and there are people that need a wide receiver and see Downs and Pittman and think, man, I kind of want them. Very little middle ground. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I don't love Pittman. He was when we did our flag plants to start the year, he was my flag plant that I said he was going to bust. Yep. And he has. I mean, his price tag never made sense to me. 3rd, 4th round. If people are concerned about Anthony Richardson and the throwing and all that, how do you justify, Michael Pittman, who I think is inferior to Josh Downs? I think Josh Downs is a better receiver. So we have a couple more questions. We do have one more segment. Let's roll our last segment and then let's see who we can get to before we are done. It's going to be Chris Olave and Darnell Mooney rest of season. One guy in Darnell Mooney, like you would never think we would be comparing the two of these players, and this is a pretty shocking graphic for most people, especially casual players who probably didn't know much about Mooney going into the year. I know Anthony was really high on Mooney. Right now, Mooney is wide receiver 12 overall. And is averaging 13.9 points per game. Chris Olave, wide receiver 44. We know he was injured. 10.63 points per game. But I do want to be fair to Chris Olave. With Derek Carr, 13.8 points per game, and that's excluding Kansas City. Now, Raheed Shaheed is gone. So that also matters because he was there when Derek Carr and with Olave and Carr. So that matters. That matters. I think I lean Darnell Mooney rest of season. I want to check out the schedules, but what do you think? I mean, I know you're a big Darnell Mooney guy. Are you? Is he locked and loaded for you as like a fringe middle wide receiver too? Like, and you prefer him over Olave, or where are you at?
He pops at week 5, right? Darnell Mooney, 31.5 fantasy points against Tampa, and then he has a 2-week drought. And then he pops again against Tampa. Well, he played Tampa twice this year already, so you're not going to see them again. Sure. And he obviously goes for 18.6, 486 and 1 on 6 targets. I think my biggest issue here is we're starting to see Kyle Pitts heat up. These running backs are now hyper involved in the offense, especially Bijan Robinson as he's cooking. You still got Drake London, who was not even involved in this game yesterday. Is this an offense to where, can they all coexist and be productive on a week-to-week basis? Because that's my issue with Darnell Mooney. He's had 4 games out of the 8 that he's played with single-digit PPR points, and then the other 4, 17, 14, 31, and 18. So I think him being the wide receiver 12 is very volatile. And that points per game, yeah, that's your points per game. But in half of those games, you're under 9.6 PPR points. That's concerning. He's been more or less a matchup play outside of the Kansas City game. He gave us 14.6. He struggled against Pittsburgh. He struggled against New Orleans. In week 4, New Orleans was still playing okay. Carolina was a smash spot, didn't show up. And then Seattle, middle of the pack, they kind of minimized him. And then you go with my issues with Chris Olave. When it was Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed was starting to get some volume. And it's like, what the hell's going on with Chris Olave? Because in the first 4 games of the year, he was under 6 targets 3 times. And then he had that, 10 against Atlanta. And then since then, obviously, he's been banged up. But, 4 targets against Kansas City, played 49 offensive snaps. And then he had the 2 offensive snaps against Tampa. That doesn't really count. And then he plays this week, and he finally gets back on track. Does Chris Olave with 14 targets? Does that stay with Derek Carr? Or is that just because, hey, the backup quarterback's going to target your best guy? You would think, in theory, Derek Carr is smart enough to be like, all right, I don't have Shaheed anymore. The best thing I have is Chris Olave. Maybe he starts getting the volume. So I honestly think Chris Olave is the one I want.
Yeah,
rest of the season.
I'm kind of with you. Dallas, Philly, Atlanta with Derek Carr. Olave saw 6, 6, and 10 targets. That's fine. Target share wise against Dallas, technically it was 46% target share. They didn't throw the ball much against Dallas. 24 then 31 against Atlanta. And this Chargers defense is the number 1 defense to limiting fantasy wide receivers. And he had 8 catches for 107 and 14 targets. So I prefer Olave as well. He gets a really nice schedule for the next 3 games: Carolina, Atlanta, Cleveland with a bye. And then he gets Washington and again Green Bay. 2 teams that are susceptible to giving up points to the wide receiver position. And then Las Vegas in week 17, who might just roll over and die at that point. Granted, the Saints might not be playing for much either. But regardless, I kind of agree with you. I'd prefer Olave at this point. We're at the 7:35 mark. It's kind of late. Let's get to Paul and then Matt, and then we are out of here, guys. We'll rattle these off quick. Paul said, "Hi guys. Is Jaden Reed a bench now without Love? If yes, do you prefer Tank Dell or Khalil Shakir as a wide receiver 2 flex? Hoping Higgins returns as well. Thanks as always. No, Jaden Reed, I'm not putting him on the bench. You got to ride him. He's a guy that they manufacture touches for. Tank Dell, no Stephon Diggs. It's enticing. It's definitely juicy. I'm not benching him for Khalil Shakir. I still prefer Jaden Reed over Tank Dell rest of the season. It's not close for me.
Jaden Reed has not delivered up to the way we thought he would this year. He's had a couple of good games, but even with Jordan Love, past couple of games has been underwhelming. Now you get Malik Willis back. And again, I think you're right. Maybe they do use his versatility to try to put points on the board.
Yeah.
The only thing I'm tempted by is Tank Dell, but you also have to keep in mind that Nico Collins is expected back week 10. So I think I would just ride out Jaden Reed at this point.
Jaden Reed has a monster schedule at the end of the year. Week 14, 15, 16, 17. Detroit, Seattle, the Saints, Minnesota, and Jordan Love. They said it's not something major. It's a groin strain. So it seems like he'll be okay. And then the last one I want to answer is Matt, and then we'll get out of here, guys. If you have questions, there was a question from Michael that said waiver wire pickups for week 9. Anthony drops his waiver wire video tomorrow, usually around the afternoon. So just take a look out for it in our YouTube archives. And we'll be able to answer that. And then we do the waiver wire show later that night, so we can also answer questions then. Matt said 10-team league, 2 wide receivers, 1 running back, 1 flex. My wide receivers are Lamb, Wilson, Puka, off waivers, Drake London, Olave, Pearsall, Jennings, running backs, Brian, Brian. I don't know if it's Chase Brown, Travis Etienne, B. Rob, Irving, Chubb. Thoughts on trade advice? Yeah, I mean, you're in a 10-team league, so you need studs. You don't need all this depth at running back. I would be willing to take B. Rob, and maybe like Ricky Pearsall or Jennings and try to get an upgrade at running back there. That would be my advice. Travis Etienne, you're not getting any value for. Nick Chubb, I don't think anybody is valuing him that high at this point. So I would even be willing to take like Bucky Irving, or look, if you take B-Rob and pair him up with Pearsall, like you should be able to get a decent upgrade at running back there, in my opinion. So that would be my advice. Try to upgrade that running back room and trade some of that depth in both rooms to upgrade there.
I think Jennings might give him his biggest pop if you can think you can afford to move off of Jennings.
Yeah.
I think pairing him up with B-Rob would be your best bet to get a legitimate upgrade.
Yeah.
Like Pearsall's nice, but I think Jennings, people still think, oh man, they had that one big game, and that's going to stick in the back of people's minds.
Yeah. The only other thing, Hustle Kings, because he sent the super chat in before and he's coming back to us. He said, drop Shakir and get downs. If you need the upside, sure. If you don't need if your wide receiver room is lacking pop, sure. But if you don't need that pop, stick with Shakir. He's giving you 10 fantasy points in every game besides 1. He's a safe play. So you know what you're getting, at least 10 points every week.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Yeah, that's going to do it for us. Great show. Anthony, take us out.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up now. Like Pete said, waiver wire video. I'm going to try to get that out by 10 a.m. That's usually my goal. And then, I believe, Pete, your video, your defensive streamers comes out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then obviously tomorrow night, if you have waiver wire questions, we'll be here just like today to answer them. Start time normally right around 6 Eastern. But for Pete and myself, this is the Face Off Sports Network. If you want to win, you have to tune in. We'll see you tomorrow night.